Greetings, greetings. My name is Keats Ross. This is the PRAGMAGICK weekly liminal stream. Those of you in the comments, or I'm sorry, the live chat, please let me know if the volume is okay, if everything's coming through. And here I am. Hello, everyone. Tonight is pretty special. It's the third week in a row of doing the weekly liminal stream, and I've composed a few words to tonight's guest and tonight's topic. It is tonight's program. I'm honored to be chatting with the full-time Irish rogue, sometime cultural soothsayer, Mr. Thomas Sheridan. Sheridan is a prolific writer and lecturer on everything from psychopathy to occultism, and I would consider him to be a true scholar of the likes of H.P. Lovecraft and modern occultism. When I book these liminal streams, it's my aim to flourish within a topic of discourse. There'd be a personal fluency within comic books in the occult worlds, as with last week's guest, Eric Millar, or tonight's discussion on the affluence of occult tropes with modern cinema. I've been in a deep ponderance with what the cultural implications could be when it comes to modern occult tropes in cinema. And who better to chat with about these ponderings than Mr. Sheridan, whose occult symbolism look into Ari Aster's Hereditary via his Beyond Room 313 YouTube channel had me reeling for more. Hopefully, tonight we can weave and burrow through the trope, unveil some generally luminous concepts, and throw away misguided interpretation of occultic ideas or principles common in cinema. Mr. Thomas Sheridan, thank you for joining.
Hey, good to be back, Keats. I love that piece of music you played at the beginning.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, that's original composition. I'll get copyright struck from my record label because of it, and that's just the way things are.
I like that kind of American, kind of spooky desert highway Americana.
Nailed it. No, I appreciate that. Well, thank you. Yeah, I have another. So what I've been doing every liminal stream too is I'll showcase some more audiomancy that I've been doing, and I'll sequence it with a video about tonight's topic. So if you stay to the end, anyone who's listening in the chat, I've got another treat for you. But anyways, enough about me. Mr. Thomas Sheridan, how the hell have you been?
Oh, I'm just moseying along during these very strange times. 2020 has certainly been a challenging year. I've had a lot of strange thoughts go through my head, and it's probably, I know in years to come, I'll look back at this year probably been a very good creative, furnace, but at the moment it doesn't feel, it's like we're in a toxic relationship with society, basically. And it's just very strange. But apart from that, I'm fine. I'm keeping busy. I'm not I want to get more into. I'm working on more films and I'm putting more work into them, and they're taking longer. So there's that kind of thing is going on. And I'm revisiting a lot of the books that I read years ago that I haven't read since I was a kid. Like I'm currently working my way through Moonchild by Crowley. It's probably 30 years since I read that, and it's like a treat. It's a really fun novel, and I've forgotten all that. So unlike other books that I read when I was younger, so that's sort of like a kind of doing a scholarship life review in a way,
right? Yeah,
that kind of thing. But yeah, it's I think that's this is definitely a year of shadow, and we know that good art comes out of struggle and turmoil and darkness.
I was going to say, usually adversity breeds passion, and I'm a fond believer in that. Though it's not without to say there's just been so much turmoil, both above and below, considering the state of the world. And it's funny too, and we talked about this a little bit before the stream, when I watched your Beyond Room 313 video about Hereditary, which really sparked why I wanted to talk to you tonight. You had mentioned you had some correlation with the Hindu idea of Kaliyuga. And the film came out in 2018. I think your review was a year later. But it seems like 2020, if any, this is the beginning of the Kaliyuga.
The beginning of the end, I think, of the Kaliyuga. Well, we're in the Kaliyuga now,
Right.
But
The
yeah,
downslope, hopefully.
yeah, it's interesting talking to Brahmins and stuff like that in the East, and it's their approach to things is because Hinduism is essentially paganism. There's no fixity of canon or doctrine. That as new information comes in, you can actually alter dates. They're not hard and fast. And now they're all telling me that it's 2024, 2025 is when the cycle and the completion of the Kali Yuga comes to its end, and then we're out of it. And yeah, everything that's it's happening right now. Everything that's takes place in that's described at the end of each yuga is happening right now. People don't know themselves. There's a great sense of loss in people to the point where people don't know. I'm not getting into this is not a political statement, but like when you have people, you have this thing with the people not knowing their genders or having 75 genders and all this kind of stuff. This is all part of the great bewilderment at the end. It's not, I'm not putting down things like that, but I'm just saying that's what's happening, and it's the fixity of natural purposes become extremely fluid, and we hear that term a lot. Fluid. We hear that a lot nowadays. There's also other things like in the Babes prophecy, the Macca's prophecy in the Celtic paganism, that they talk about the time very similar to right now. Like a summer without a summer without a harvest, a family without a purpose. The same kind of ideas expressed, but not like the Christian way. Not like it's the end of the world and we all go to heaven. It's just
not Revelation.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, like when a relationship comes to end, it's usually pretty awful at the very end, but it has to be that awful to clear it out and begin again. Or in a job that you hate or something like that. And why wouldn't our consciousness in reality not be the same? It would be.
I know from personal experience, this year has kind of dismantled my idea of my absolutism as a being, and even like the path that I had woven in front of me completely obliterated. And so, yeah, there is just this kind of like baby, newborn relationship with the state of the world and the, the tethers that bind us all and what we're doing and what we can do. I do see greener pastures. I do see, the ash of this kind of reforming. And I think a lot of it is, in the realms of more of the, horticulture and smaller groups and communities kind of coming together and living off the land, and not really, it's being almost a little bit, I don't want to get political either because this is not what I mean, but it is a less of a government faction. I
agree. Yeah, like more of a traditional anarchist mindset.
Yeah. And like, I appreciate that. I do. It's hard for everybody though to kind of pull those tethers away. And it's funny bringing up, modern, I say occult cinema, but there's a few that really kind of charge archetypes of sincere occult practice. When there's others that really bend into things without maybe even knowing, it's like a lot of this retrospective kind of idea, like, holy shit, the multiverse, that's a heavily idea, or you know what I mean? It's always this kind of retrospective thing. And I feel the flourishings too with people not knowing who they are anymore. We turn to magic, we turn to the occult a lot of times in desperation. And I think there's the good of that, where there's, films and other media that really inspire look into it. And then there's other ones that nullify it as some horror trope, So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I think Hereditary, to me, it's a great film. It's absolutely haunting. And your review about it, I mean, we both know you know, you know, the what do you call it? You know, the Paimon, you know, associations and stuff. But there was something that haunted me with it, and it seemed like Ari Aster, the director, I'm not entirely sure how knowledgeable he was mining those things or choosing them to be scary, you know, kind of tropes, almost within a Christian paradigm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but there's also a third option that he could have been being forced along. That
Oh,
you know, there's that element too. I mean, you look. I remember seeing a documentary about the Omen movie back in and The Exorcist and a film called The Devil's Reign with Ernest Borgnine
oh yeah,
back in the 70s, and the directors of all those and the actors of those films all said the same thing, that they felt that there was a third force guiding the production of the film, a sort of like a hypermuse, a super muse
would you
outside
consider
that.
that like the Burroughs third mind kind of idea?
Yeah, yeah, or it could have
Or
been
more of just
a
like possessive?
collect,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, or a collective unconscious thing, or you know,
right.
let's put it out there, even maybe an entity. But you know, did the film? I think the film actually brought, we know demons are essentially just, you know, archetypes of certain forces of behavior and stuff like that.
Right.
Ultimately, they don't exist, you know, any more than gods don't exist. But they allow conveyance of sensations and concepts. And this Pyman thing was probably brought into manifestation through the actual film. And I mean, I saw the film and it left me feeling weird afterwards. I felt quite unsettled by it, not in a scary way, but I felt like I'd been definitely shifted into a different element of consciousness or something like that, like a bad mushroom trip or something. It had that kind of
Right.
aftermath like that. I had friends who went to see it in the cinema and they were left very, very rattled by it and very, you know, seeing on the big screen. I only saw it on streaming, but on the big screen they said it was quite almost, it was quite a difficult few days afterwards after having seen that film. And so there was definitely that film took us into places that probably hadn't been the consciousness probably hadn't been taken into since The Exorcist, which was 73. And that
Right.
film, I mean, I've seen videos of people's who saw that movie coming outside and saying to the people in the queuing up to go in, "Don't go watch the film. It's just don't watch it. It'll upset you really badly." And it wasn't in an evangelical Christian way. They were genuinely trying to say to people, "No, if you don't go in there, it's not easy to watch this film." And
Yeah.
it's so I think since then, Hereditary was the only one I know that actually had that effect on people. And you don't get that effect if you don't have, a certain charge or force inherent in it. And I think the whole atmosphere of the film, I mean, even if it wasn't about, the, the, the possession of a demon inside a boy's body, the way that film is made is very Hitchcockian type scenes where you have the model of the house that she builds
So much
dioramas.
foreshadowing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have
Much.
like you have the house has long shots, so the rooms in the house look like in the real house look like the models, and and you're looking like a diorama with figures and miniatures in it, and it's like it would remind me of Rear Window or something, Hitchcock's Rear
Right.
Window in that sense. But even if it had nothing to do with spooky, occult, I think that alone would have rattled people.
I guess yes, that's kind of what I mean. Like, the utilization. Like, do you think? Well, because the common cinema goer won't know Paimon, know the Lesser Key or the Goetia or whatever. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
wouldn't. But there's something empirically haunting that he did use, organic occultism within
Oh,
it,
he
even
did.
if it was, yeah,
Yeah, it was like chaos magic.
yeah,
It was like the way people use Lovecraftian entities in chaos, as prime movers. It was done similar with Pyman, but he had his knowledge too down as well, because Pyman is associated with chocolate, and Charlie eats the chocolate. She's eating
right.
the chocolate bar at the beginning, and
Well,
he's also
music, yeah,
associated with a blue light, and the blue light
yeah,
appears at several scenes in the school. There's one very good scene where it rushes down the corridor in the school, and Yeah, I mean, so he did his homework to a degree, to a fair degree, but yeah, I mean, but at the same time too, yeah, it was just like it was just like he became a prime mover for something else. Like on top of that, another layer on top of that, and that layer was
Right.
the actual ritual that the film itself conjured.
And to me, that's what makes it such a great film, because it wasn't, it wasn't harking on this overwrought knowledge of the Goetia. It utilized it for people that have a passing, ancillary, kind of idea of it. It added another layer. That's what made it like truly haunting. Now, there's scenes in the film which are, you can tell that he did study ceremonial magic. Paimon encased in a triangle on the ground,
Yep.
which is used, to bind, the demon. Like there's little things that really pull through. I think why it perseveres wasn't that, hey, it's a creepy occult movie. It was that it was everything else, and it had the occult tropes in it.
And he changed the seal of Paimon. It's not he removed one of the elements from it.
I was gonna say, yeah, I noticed
Yeah,
that.
so that was an interesting thing. I'd like to know why he did that. I think maybe he just didn't want to tempt fate or uh, do something. I mean, apparently the young guy who appeared in that film had to go to therapy afterwards.
Oh, I'm sure he had some of the most troubling scenes just as an
Mm.
actor. I would, couldn't imagine, like, I mean, to me, chaos magic is method acting too. So if like actual method acting, it would be pretty detrimental utilizing stuff. It makes so much sense that Ari Aster, changed the sigil enough just in case, just in case he wasn't actually, inadvertently invoking something he didn't stand.
Yeah, it's the same reason why in ceremonial magic, and also in things like acting as well, going right back to the Greek mystery religions, plays you're a character on the stage, you're not yourself,
Right.
and so that's to distinctly remove you from being named in the process. You'll be the magus, or you'll be the scribe, the querent. You won't be yourself. You won't be Keats Ross in that process, because it's dangerous. It's dangerous. The creation of an avatar, and I think the actor who played Peter in Hereditary, I think his avatar and his real self at some point collided during the production of that film.
It reminds me too, and people have come out against it, but say, Heath Ledger's fall, and a lot of people love the folklore idea that he couldn't shake, the miasma of like being the Joker, because he locked himself in a room and kept a diary,
Yeah.
and Christian Bale and other people have come out and said, he's an actor, you can shake it off. But I think there's truth to both. I mean, I think if you're an actor, especially that gifted of one, in any case, like, you carry these archetypes of these characters with you at all times, or they were always there, and it's a sort of exorcism, right?
Exactly, and you have to be wary of it. I remember years ago reading a Michael Caine, his biography, and he came to fame in the '60s in a movie called Alfie, where he basically played this womanizing dirtbag. And he said in the book, was very interesting, that he had to actually stop himself from consciously becoming Alfie in real life, because when he got fame, he had all these women throwing themselves at him and everything like that. And he said he actually had to physically and emotionally and psychologically prevent himself from being Alfie, because he had been possessed by the character afterwards.
There's something organic too. I think, to me, it might be a bit more. I mean, you would know more about this than I would, but of a sociopathy, to have the ability to turn that shit off and on.
Yeah, well, that's
Like,
that's the thing with the acting school, isn't it? That's what they learn. That's not you on the stage. You're playing
right.
you're channeling something else. And I think this is one of the things with the occult. And this is one of the things, like, I don't have a lot of issues with Anton LaVey and the Church of, the Church of Set and so on, and those people, and the Temple of Set and the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
But they were themselves in their working. They were too to themselves or something like that, even though they wore silly costumes and stuff. And even though the Satanic Bible is an amazing book and everything, but they Anton
They
LaVey,
played the character. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And I wonder what has there been repercussions from that?
And speaking, I think, penultimate, or not penultimate, not second to last, but pretty much the last word on everyone's lips when it comes to modern occult cinema is Kenneth Anger. And that's a person who lived it, who was, actually doing ritual work and stuff within film stuff, never shook it. It was just apparently him, and I wonder if people that kind of come into those spheres, whether it be like Mick Jagger and Lucifer or whatever, coming in and investigating these things, like if they're not tainted for the rest of their days because of the intensity of someone's, character and work within creating that art.
Yeah, like I even think of, like, you look at an album like Sgt. Pepper's by the Beatles, that's like a ritual.
Right.
And just John Lennon was doing things that were a lot like the Burroughs kind of cut-ups. Like, I know, like, for the benefit of Mr. Kite was a poster that he read off a wall. He sung the lyrics of a poster that he had on his wall for an old show in Victorian times. But I often wondered if John Lennon's fate was intermingled with that stuff. And I mean, the occultism of the Beatles hasn't been properly done yet. There's a lot of conspiratorial nonsense, but
right.
the actual
But Paul
thing
is dead.
yeah, and then other things too, like, there's a picture of Crowley on the cover of the but I think there was a subliminal occultism is going on with them guys as well. And in many ways it wasn't as overt as what the Stones were doing with, wearing the pan head on stage and stuff like that.
Right.
Need the
Their
pound
satanic majesties. Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes, but that's the thing, is that's often the most powerful magic. Like, you could probably create the most powerful magic from a cookbook than you could from many grimoires.
Yeah. I agree.
Simply because
it's almost perfect ancestral magic too.
Yeah, well, it's the destruction of the destruction of the whole. It's the obliteration of the process in order to make the process greater. And this is a central tenet within Freemasonry, to gather up which has been scattered and to reassemble it into something new, which is like, which then that brings you to Burroughs and his cut-ups and stuff like that as well. But
or even Kaliyuga.
Yeah. So people are, this is one of the things, like, in my own work, trying to get people, like, think outside the ceremony, think outside the grimoire, think outside the sigil, think, it expand the workings into magic into enormous, the enormous, like in sorcery, I told people, like, well, you want to build up a church, you go on a fairground, you go on a roller coaster, this kind of thing.
Right.
There's ways, you go to rock concerts and this kind of thing, but there's other ways too as well.
Like, live.
Yeah. So it becomes a kind of a living process, So, and like I said, there's no reason why you couldn't use, you couldn't use a cookbook to summon something or anything. I mean, we know that this. There's characters from books and comic books have appeared in real life all the time. There's that famous story of the Shadow, the author who wrote the Shadow books and the radio plays. To this day,
Orson Welles, right? I used to grow up listening to the Orson Welles Shadow radio plays. My favorite stuff.
Oh yeah, and look, War of the Worlds made people really believe there was an alien invasion happening, and that's the power. This is, I mean, this is, no. The great occultist whoever lived never achieved what Orson Welles did with War of the Worlds.
I love this. You're like striking the vein of what I've been talking about a lot lately, which is kind of a divergent magic, which is truly anarchic. It's truly yourself. It's truly custom. Even now with the advent of, going off topic, but even with the advent of chaos magic, it's become a defined thing. It's become a certain manual of sorts. And I think it gets lost a lot about what the purpose was, or like what punk rock was as an ethos, instead of, 3 chords and a leather jacket. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I like that term, divergent. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's yeah, and it's I think people terribly limit themselves. Oh, I must follow this particular practice, this particular Golden Dawn practice. Oh, I must, follow this, that, and the other. Okay, that's fair enough. If it works for you, great. But I know people have been doing that for years and they haven't really benefited from it other than maybe the social aspects of it or something like that. But they're, it's this whole Kafkaesque thing, sit in your room and the world will come to you. There's a lot of truth to that,
Yeah.
just
And
wait.
it's, yeah, these currents, we talk about a lot that I struggle with too, because I'm very much of the, not a non-traditionalist. And that even comes with, I don't want to practice the thing or current that's been charged, so much for hundreds of years. You know what I mean? It seems like it kind of feeds into that without diverging from that. But, that's a story for another day for sure. But I wanted to ask you, since we were talking about Hereditary, I don't think that you have said much about Midsummer. And I have a lot to say about Midsummer. I would love to hear what you have to say about Ari Aster's follow-up to Hereditary.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I found it a tiresome dirge. It went on far too long. It was basically a teenage breakup movie, and I couldn't relate to the characters. I couldn't feel them. I didn't. It could have been great, but it was like it, the whole thing of it was very pedestrian. Oh, Nordic pagans, they into human sacrifice and all this and killing themselves and stuff like that.
But yeah,
And it was like, oh, hold on a second. There's no there in any of the eddas or any of the text. There's nothing about any of this stuff. That's purely a thing that Christians imposed later upon us, saying they were brutal religions and stuff like that. We don't, sacrifice didn't literally mean sacrificing, killing people. It meant giving something up, and
right.
it could be money. And so I found that a little bit. I mean, bordering on prejudice, I have to say.
Yes, that's exactly where, yeah.
If that was about any other religion, people would be saying, "Oh, that was a bit harsh. That was a bit harsh."
Well, and so this is played into kind of my temperament with Hereditary in the long form, or like the retrospective idea. Great movie, but there's something simmering about, oh, was he just using the occult as a horror trope? Whereas like Midsummer, he's using paganism as a horror trope, and
Yeah,
it falls flat. It didn't feel good. I will say some of the best and true, almost true to style depictions of a mushroom trip on film. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I will give it that, but
And that young woman played a self-absorbed, neurotic girlfriend perfectly.
no, and it was a hard. I mean, I thought it started off strong. He's so good, opening the floodgates with like the trauma of the beginning of that film, and like such an inventive way, if not
Yeah,
like completely absurd, of how her sister, killed herself and her parents with the carbon monoxide poisoning and like duct taping the,
yeah,
the
but that
vents to their
that that
face.
that should have been. I would have resolved that at the end. That maybe she was the killer.
Right.
Something like that. There was no payoff in the end. In the end, was nothing.
It did seem, and I think, that's kind of what haunts me still. It did seem like the utilization of, divergent religions or theology or, spiritual
Yeah,
practices as horror tropes,
yeah,
as, the scary other that
yeah.
everyone talks about.
And you'd have other things like Buddhism being portrayed as sort of like the Zen mastery of like peace and love and vegetarianism. But there are Buddhists in Asia who are like murderers and killers and have like gangs that they're like as bad as any Abrahamic religion in terms of it. These Buddhist murder gangs, and they're practicing Buddhists. And they would
Mhm.
use and they so. But you'd never see that portrayed in Hollywood. You'd never see that portrayed ever. It's just the whole thing that paganism and particularly European, Northern, Germanic, Celtic, whatever you want, they seem to be easy targets. They
Oh
seem
yeah.
to be easy targets.
Now, have you just to kind of move on, have you watched any other cinema, maybe not so wholeheartedly occultnik, but any film that has come out recently that really kind of shivered you about, of deeper occult principles? And when I say occult, I think I should define it. I mean, like, yeah, a divergent, a spiritual subset, of bettering the self, of bettering,
Yeah.
your connection to the ethereal, that sort of thing.
No, I haven't.
Right.
I haven't. I've seen older films that I did discover that in it, but I didn't. No, I haven't seen any recent ones. No.
What were some of the older films?
Uh, the Stephen King's The Mist.
Oh, yeah.
I watched that because it reminded me of 2020, but there's an awful lot of spiritual truths in that film. The Mrs. Carmody, the born again Christian loony person, was actually right all along. She actually saved them and led those people into redemption because they didn't leave the supermarket, where the other guy brought the mail. That was a very powerful thing. That was quite a spiritual climax. At the end, there's a horrific end to that film, absolutely appalling end.
Oh, it's man, that talk about one that haunts me still. Yeah, that sacrifice, or I guess the upsetting. Unnecessary sacrifice.
And then the mist clears,
right?
And it clears, and being familiar with my geography of New England, it had cleared from the north. So, but at the moment he was like exterminating those people in the back in his car, the ones in the supermarket had already been freed. And I found that that was like, that's one of those multi-layered films. You can see many things into it. In fact, I want to do a review for 313 on that film, but that's, it would have been very easy to say, oh, Mrs. Carmody, the born again Christian lady, was just evil and she got them all destroyed. But she was the only one who was not lying to them. She saved them. She did save them by staying there and waiting for God's to, and in her mind, it would have been a God ended the mist, but it didn't matter. Whatever justification was, she was right.
I mean, that could be, I was going to say that could be translated too about, the old idea of shamanism being, people that were more mentally, stable, right? Yeah. And here in this modern culture, we're quick to chastise folks that are just odd, when they could be soothing exactly what, is needed to be said.
The whole thing of the psychotic drowns in the water, the mystic swims, in that kind of the whole Nietzsche kind of thing. But another one was Mulholland Drive. I actually did a review of that.
I was so happy you're going to bring this up. Yes.
Yeah. Again, I'm not a huge fan of David Lynch, to be honest with you. No, not because of anything against him. I've not invested my cognition into his work in the same way I would say with Hitchcock or someone like that. But that film, I thought, a lot of people didn't like it. They thought it was a silly film about a guilt complex, but it was deeper than that. And there was also a strong sex magic element to that as well.
Yeah.
There's this impossibly beautiful brunette.
But it was almost like self-sex magic, because to me, the two main characters were, I'm going to use the word again, but like divergent selves. Like one was the lineage of her getting what she wanted, when she moved to the small town, becoming a cinema harlot or whatever. And the other one was the, struggling actress paying hitmen to get rid of her old self, to become or to take the place of the new one, and that one haunts me still. There's a lot of good cinema, like a lot of good cinematic language stuff in it, with the blue lights and the silencio.
Very well made, made. And even when they show the different streets like Mulholland, and at the beginning, the street signs, they're almost like stepping into different elements of initiation in different parts of the quadrant, into different parts of the thresholds. And I found that really clever use of cinema as well, using the streets of Hollywood,
And like literally too, and I saw this breakdown once of, if you look at the Google Maps of like where everything is kind of situated, it makes like perfect sense as to the apartment that she's going to would be the old Hollywood, but it's not there anymore. So you're already like, it's subversive in you thinking there's a linear thing when a little bit of homework will tell you like all the hints were there.
Well, I'm very fascinated by Hollywood occult.
Me too. Yeah.
But there's not a lot of info out there, and it's unfortunate. You have Kenneth Anger, and you have,
right.
Jack Parsons was there, and this kind of thing, and all that.
You
stuff
have like the speculation of Black Dahlia and like what that was.
Yeah, and just the whole concept of the alchemical nature of that part of the world, oil, sunshine,
turning shit into gold. Yeah.
Exactly, and people,
Yeah.
And then the Indian, surrounded by these mountains with all this ancient Indian hieroglyphs on it and every petroglyphs on it. It's just, to me, I'm fascinated by that whole Hollywood occult thing, and there's not enough stuff on it out there. But to me, it's intoxicatingly interesting.
Yeah, old Hollywood, especially like the James Elroy stuff, LA Confidential, White Jazz, and like, those books, there's tinge with it. He always talks about, I mean, we can go deep into, especially the Kubrick's, Eyes Shut. That was based in New York, but I think he had a lot to say about, forgive the term, but like the Illuminati of the Hollywood elite. And what that was. And there's a lot of speculation too about, certain time missing from his final cut and, his death and everything. But I think that's when it flounders more into the conspiratorial stuff.
Yeah, but this conspiratorial stuff can be. I like the kind of the Shakespearean tragedies of the Fatty Arbuckle, Rudolph Valentino. Rudolph Valentino. There isn't anything overtly cultic there, but there is something occultic feeling about it. I can't explain it. At the same time, you have these the likes of these Cecil B. DeMille epics, these grand epics that he made back in silent movies. And then when all those German guys came over before the war from UFA in Berlin, Fritz Lang and the rest of them, I would imagine a lot of them would have been schooled in sort of like at least Freemasonry, if anything. So there's a lot. They came over to Hollywood and started making very interesting films and adding their own techniques and spins on it. And I find, and even the things like later on, like the Mansons, back to Michael Caine in his book.
Yellow Drive. Yeah.
He even said that he saw them at these parties all the time. He says they were Hollywood insiders. He says they only later on made it out to see him that they were, they freaks who busted their way into Hollywood, but they were not. They were in Hollywood. Like, what's that about?
Yeah, Hollywood too. I mean, it's so transfers to in the kind of Laurel Canyon, 60s, 70s scene of music, and that kind of confluence. You had the cover of Love's first album, with Arthur Lee standing in the ruins of Bela Lugosi's, mansion.
Yeah.
And like all these like weird touchstones about kind of darker cinema, and there's something about, there's something to be said about ley lines, how things kind of positioned in Hollywood.
And the environomicon to the Mojave Desert, like it's like this paradise. Like when Hollywood first started, that would have been paradise, the best climate in the world on the ocean. It would have been a wonderful place to live. Actually, I could just imagine back living there in the 30s and 40s. It must have been beautiful, but you're tapping into all this magic. Like that's why those Christian missions built, those Spanish monks built all those missions all up along the coast. I think they were deliberately built on either areas that had geomancy kind of vibes to them, or to stop something. You know, it was almost like they conquered the Indians the same way they conquered the pagans of Europe. That where's your sacred site? Okay, we'll put a mission on top of that. They did the same thing, and they specifically did it in California, as if there was something special about California and they inherently knew it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always harken back to just the kind of, like you were saying, this alchemical, you know, process of, you know, turning shit off the street into,
Yeah.
you know, cinematic gold. And, you know, going back to like the James Ellroy thing when in LA Confidential, like, I don't know if you've seen the film, it's one of the, I love it, like one of the best
Oh yeah,
adaptations ever.
yeah, it's fantastic.
Curtis Hanson, yeah, such a good movie. But he tinges on James Ellroy too in the book, tinges on the factory of turning these women in and out, you know,
Yeah.
plastic surgery, this, you know, whore of Babylon kind of idea that one of them's gonna, you know, make it, and
Yeah.
one of them's the alchemical gold that's gonna, you know, turn our studio into the next Paramount or whatever.
Yep. And she's totally sacrificable, even no matter how powerful she is. Like she becomes Marilyn Monroe or something like that.
Right. Yeah, the fate still isn't sound. Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
you know.
They all become the Black Dahlia in the end.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I huge fan of the whole Hollywood noir. You know, that big fan, and there are, you know, tons of occult underpinnings. You know, there was in Chinatown even too, like he who holds the water, you know, like holds the city, and yeah, just these ideas of it, they become so elemental, especially with the gangs and the people. It's like it's either guns, elements, or not guns, you know, drugs, or you know, beauty, or money, or, you know, as something as elemental as, you know, water. And it's very interesting.
And you have like the likes of the Beach Boys doing these hymns to California.
Right. Kind of charging the folklore of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pet Sounds to me was the biggest breakup record to California for me in my personal life. So it's funny you bring that up. You know, because it's like when I left listening to that album, it was very much like a detox from the salt water that was in the air. You know?
Yeah, and there's another example of magic as well, because the sort of mundane magic or divergent magic, whatever you call it, the last band on earth you would actually associate with producing a work that could possibly go into those domains would be the Beach Boys, and they did it.
Absolutely.
Well, they did it. I mean, you know, what's that? There's a track on it that has a train, a train going by. And it's like, what the hell? It's very strange and stuff. Like the Caroline Knows. They're almost like math. The album's like a mass almost. Like it's a mass for California, you know?
Yeah, to me, like, and that's what it was. It was this mass abduction, you know? It was like this great pilgrimage from the former self, which was the higher marketed, you know, perfect California honeypot kind of band, to, you know, this detox in music, you know, and that's when they did the best stuff. And I feel that's the same way with a lot of movies. You know, you go through like Wes Craven with Serpent and the Rainbow, you know, or Suspiria, Dario Argento, that's Italian, but you have a lot of films that kind of discuss this underlying nature of beauty being kind of this smoke dark, you know, like wonderment, like this bad alchemy of wanting.
Yeah, well, Dario Argento in Suspiria, and actually, he's a very interesting character, and his films, you know, his belief that there's three cities that are like the devil's triangle in Europe.
Right.
Turin, which is a city I know quite well. Some say Basel, some say London, and Lyon is another one. But there's like generally it's considered to be Budapest, Turin, and Basel in Switzerland, which is an interesting place. And this is what the three that he's fascinated by, the enviromancy and the geomancy of these locations. So it doesn't, you know, it's the same kind of thing. He specifically sets his films in areas that have this kind of energy to them. even though, but he doesn't do them in the film, because in the film they're usually set in the cities. They're not set that they're, like Beefield, I think, is where they filmed the original Suspiria, and that was actually a substitute for Sheridan. So he's making avatars of cities as well. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I mean, that could be said for a lot of Hollywood too, but the whole screen culture too, very much just avatars of lifelike places to play in and ruin, to blow up, to exist in. Have you seen Dark Song?
No, have I?
A Dark Song, yeah, it's basically like the Abramelin.
A dark song.
Dark Song, yeah.
Yeah, a dark song. Yeah, okay. Oh, absolutely. I did a review of that as well. That's an Irish film. It's set in Wales, though.
Yeah. Forget what his name is, Liam Gavin or something.
Yeah, I know. In fact, I had a weird synchronicity. A friend of mine in New Orleans, who I've known from, excuse me, that I knew from my music days in New York, just out of the blue contacted me and he said, "Do you know this Liam Whelan guy?" And I said, "Who?" Whatever his name was, Liam. I can't remember his second name.
I think Liam Gavin. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, and he said to me, "Do you know him?" And I said, "Who is he?" He's in Dublin. No, he made a film called The Dark Song. It's very good. Oh, I saw Dark Song. And so there's a weird synchronicity that my friend contacts me out of the blue to ask me about this. Apparently he met him as well, somewhere along the line. But yeah, A Dark Song is a masterpiece.
What did you think about it? Yeah, you loved it?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought for those two actors to pull off that performance is unbelievable.
It's incredible. It's like a bottle episode too. It's basically, just in one setting.
And I know where they filmed it too. They filmed that in the Dublin mountains, and I grew up in Dublin. And there's Dublin next to the cities is a vast wilderness. It's like the Pine Barrens type thing in New Jersey. You have, next to Philadelphia, this wilderness. Well, the Dublin and Wicklow Mountains are like that. They're next because they were deliberately depopulated to stop military things from happening up there. So they were kept empty for centuries. And and so there's only one road goes across it, the military road that was built by the British to chase Irish rebels down. And but the whole area is covered in megaliths. It's spooky. It's vast. It's empty. It's like Mars. It's like being on another planet. And they picked the location perfect for that. And although it's supposed to be set in Wales, I know exactly where they filmed all that. And I thought that was that. I mean, yeah, it was the Abramelin, more or less, kind of, but it was. It wasn't just that. It was a beautiful film. It was beautiful. It was about
well done.
And it was about what you said, the building of the self and the spiritual. What's the word? Completion. Because in the end, she came to the conclusion that her drive for revenge was ultimately what was destroying her.
Right. Yeah, and to me, it depicted, what we talked about, the ritual of Abramelin, the mage, and how sincerely heavy and psychotically patient you have to be to create something. And never before on film have I actually seen a depiction of just the insanity that goes into doing work that deep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the patience of the movie was like scary good. Good.
Yeah. The thing is that the reason why those rituals were so like that, so brutal, is because there was less energy in the world back then. You couldn't prevail of energy like you could at rock concerts today and things like that. It was a candlelit world. There wasn't. It's like you had to actually build up the charge the old-fashioned way by basically torturing yourself, and so that's why it wouldn't be necessary to do that today. But yes, it was just the actress that played the lead role was great, the actor too, and the whole feeling was. And it really was a payoff. There was a real payoff at the end that Midsommar didn't have. It had, to see that angel, that guardian angel in the bedroom was just it was breathtaking. Actually, the scene. It was so beautiful.
It was so earned. Even as a viewer, just because it's a hard watch. It's one of those like I'm so happy I did. Every part of it makes sense, and it's a beautiful rhythm and sequential, film about a very bottle like idea, but to be able to have that, like to revel in that comeuppance with her, at the end
Yeah.
was something else. And that's the thing too, Ari Aster with Midsummer, as he did with Hereditary, there's a lot of foreshadowing. So I think in Midsummer it was very obvious,
Yeah.
the foreshadowing, where you're seeing the depictions of, the rituals and stuff on the wall as transitions, and you're like, why would they put this there? Oh, okay. Well, it's obviously because
Yeah.
this is coming by later. Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't too much. It was kind of a lazy subliminals or something like that, lazy code. But yeah, But again, there was no payoff in that film. Like I said, it would have been fantastic if it turned out that she was the murderer of her sister and her parents.
I love that. Yeah,
That
that's an
would have been
incredible twist.
that could have saved the film. That could have saved the film. But the dark song, the payoff is, that's what spiritual is. That's what magic is. To bring yourself to an equilibrium.
Yeah, and for the payoff to be something so like small to the outsider, but so deeply inner to the person going through it. I don't know. It totally transcended what a climax, should be when considering this stuff. That's
And
exactly what it's like,
and there was a penultimate climax too, because right before she sees the angel, she's basically assaulted by these demons.
Right.
One cuts her finger off, breaks her
I
finger
know. I was
off.
going to say the finger murder. I hate it. I can't see that again. But yeah, I think in the pantheon, when you look at modern occult cinema, I think dark songs in Hereditary, to a degree, they come the closest as far as like widely reached, cinematic depictions of what, is a healing of all of these facets. Whereas Dark Song to me was more of like the perfect personal, kind of journey, and of a trope. It was the film. Like that's what it was meant to be. Whereas Hereditary, I think, they used it as a trope. I hate to say trope because it was better used than just being a trope, but it was very much a psychological thriller before it was, anything else.
Have you heard my theory about the Loch Ness Monster?
No, please go on.
The Loch Ness Monster, I believe, was left as a residual thought form after Crowley didn't complete the Abimelum. The sightings happened immediately after that, almost, and began. Now there's a story that Saint Columba, who was a famous Irish missionary, when converting the pagans of that part of Scotland, banished a monster from the lake. But if you actually study that, it was from the Ness River, about 40 miles away, and it was a serpent, not a monster. And so there's literally nothing. There's no mention of a monster in that lake until Crowley departed for Paris or wherever you went to. But what I found interesting, that's my theory. And as they're restoring Boleskine House, I predicted that there'll be greater sightings and the best sightings ever of the Loch Ness Monster. And sure enough, they're happening on a colossal rate now, to the point where they even had an article last week saying we have to basically accept that something in the lake is real. Whatever it is, it's there. And that was like, mainstream accepting that. And at the end of the dark song, what does she do with the guy's body? She lays it in the lake, in the pond, in front of the house. Remember, there's a pond there, and she lays him into the water almost to give it peace. Like, and I was thinking, either this guy has heard my theory, or it's just a piece of amazing synchronicity. But she lays she makes the disturbance in the water. It doesn't happen because he's been laid and it's been closed. The ritual's been closed with him laid to rest in the water. And I just, my God, and it was so close to the Loch Ness thing, leaving the thing. And people said, oh, there's been demons left over that Crowley didn't banish. Well, yeah, they are. They're in the water. They're in the water. They're in the water. And so
I love that.
So I think that's always been my opinion of the Loch Ness Monster. That's why you can't get clear photographs of it. It's not actually there. It's a disturbance in the water. It's like negative energy. It's like negative space. It's trying to fill itself with the water. And what's, you might see those things if it went to, it could appear in the trees by a rustling of leaves. You might find a form, but the easiest thing for us to manifest, to visually see the disturbance left over by Crowley is in the water, because it's the most flexible. The mountain's not going to move, the house is not going to move, but the water will. The water will move, and that's almost. I'd put money on it that that's what that is.
I really enjoyed that theory. I mean, it kind of reminds me, wasn't there some like resonance after the original Wicker Man, like in that town?
I heard stories like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, speaking of Hollywood occult, when Hollywood moves into certain towns to make films and then moves out, people say the place is never the same afterwards.
Right, ravishes it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the town loses its heart, or like Hollywood stole its soul and left. Like they're making a period film or something like that. Did you ever see a film called Picnic at Hanging Rock by Peter Weir?
No, I love Peter Weir, but no, I haven't.
It was the
one
first
of the few that I've been meaning to.
Yeah, I saw that when I was a kid, and it left a very profound effect on me, mainly because the story portrayed in the film didn't actually happen. It was about a group of English schoolgirls, Australian schoolgirls, who were visiting a sacred Aboriginal site, and they all vanished off the face of the earth. And the implication is that they passed through a portal. Now, I grew up believing, or some kind of Aboriginal magic affected them. Now, I grew up believing that story was true. Apparently, it's not. It's just totally made up. But he made it so plausible that you really thought you were seeing a docudrama of an event that happened in Australia about 120 years ago, and that shows the power that he actually made a myth come true in my mind. And it was only about 10 years ago I was mentioning someone, did you ever see Peter Weir's first film, Picnic at Hanging Rock? And they go, oh, yeah. And I say, that's an amazing story. And they say, oh, no, it's not true. It's not true. It never happened. So he made a historical event that never actually take place. In my
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It reminds me of another Australian film. What was it called? It was like Lake. I'm blanking. It'll come back to me. But it reminds me as well, like this idea of, you remember the Blair when that came out?
The Blair Witch.
Remember, like it. Yeah. It just kind of over the nation. Well, I was a kid. I was like susceptible, and I knew it wasn't real, but they did this marketing with it, and they had this mockumentary come out parallel to the release of the Blair Witch, where it on Sci-Fi Channel or something completely made it seem real. Now talk about an egregore, creating that realm of belief and stuff. Like, go ahead.
I've got the box set, and I might even have that program on it. And they were did a documentary on who the Blair Witch was. And she was like this Irish witch who lived in the woods in Pennsylvania, wherever it took place. And it really, and it was the first found footage film I ever saw. So that even added to it as well. And you see nothing in it. It's all in your mind. It's all in your mind.
I know. I love it. And everyone's still haunted by the visuals of just like the hands on the tent or the people in the corner.
Yeah.
And there's nothing spectacularly overtly scary, but that to me was the most, it's the Hitchcock thing. It's the shit you don't see.
Speaking of found footage, have you seen a film called The Borderlands?
I remember Borderlands. Yeah,
it was released in America as Final Prayer, I think, but I did a review for 313 on that as well, and that is a fantastic found footage film. That's also in the kind of leaves you a bit feeling weird, like Hereditary.
There was another one like the Poughkeepsie tapes. That was more of like a serial killer leaving around tapes. But there was a huge flourish of the found footage. But yeah, like you were saying, I don't think I'd ever seen a found footage film that wasn't explicitly a documentary. So automatically, the thought form of watching found footage in a cinema is I'm being privy to real life, like this actually happened. Now add that on top, you have the sci-fi And I say mockumentary, that doesn't do it justice, because when I say mockumentary, it reminds me of Christopher Guest or
yeah.
you know,
Spinal
like
Tap, yeah.
comedic, comedic films. But it's not. It was done so well, and I think there was even part of it, and it did everything to world build. Like that, to me, that's like the best. That's the best involvement a person can have with cinema, is to be completely enveloped in it.
Yeah.
And you know, it's even gone into like the marketing side, if done well, you know, could be another cast
Well,
ritual
it is a
for it, you
ritual.
know.
Oh, it is a ritual. Yeah, it was like that
Yeah.
opening scene when I was when I was a kid in school. Alien came out, and the opening thing where in space no one can hear you scream, and I can remember that. Oh, like I went to see some, I don't know, I think it was like some stupid film that was when I was a kid, and then Alien was going to be in the cinema coming up soon, and the name of the film appearing in space, no noise, no nothing, a low level resonance hum, and
Right.
in space no one can hear you scream, like
I remember the
space.
poster. Yeah.
Oh, it was fantastic. I was about, I don't know, 14, 15. It was just a fantastic experience, to sit in the cinema and, to have that. I've had spiritual experiences in the cinema. Definitely I have, especially when I was first saw the movies. I remember like one movie I saw when I was very young was The Great Escape with Steve McQueen. And I
Hmm.
remember what really struck me in that film as a very young kid was the the searchlights moving at night through the prisoner of war camp. And it was the full on thing of like the nocturne, the the darkness and the blazing light within it. Maybe it was even a Luciferian element that crept into my own consciousness, But I remember having a very deep effect on me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's haunting.
Yeah.
It sticks. I mean, yeah. I obviously I use that term loosely. I use it all the time, but that's the beat of, I've always said that film, to me, as someone that creates in a lot of different artistic mediums, to me is the ultimate
Yeah.
medium. You have everything involved, from writing, sound, music, uh, film, video or whatever. Like it encapsulates all. To me, every film is almost an egregore.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that spiraled us out. I did a series of, I know this is not in the brief of this discussion, but just to show you, I did a last year, I think it was, with Greg Moffat on Legalized Freedom. We did a thing on folk horror, and also on the hauntology. Sorry, on hauntology, and
Right. I love hauntology.
yeah,
Yeah.
you and your listeners would like those talks. Well, we did it mostly from a kind of a British Irish perspective. We didn't bring
Erida,
too
right?
yeah, it
Like
didn't bring too
everything.
much Hollywood stuff into it, a little bit, but it's great to see this subject be gaining such prominence now. Hauntology, folk horror, and this occultic way of looking at the cinema. I think this is a huge untapped resource that only with sort of the emergence of hauntology and even things like analog synthesizers and that kind of thing, that
Exactly.
only now we're understanding the occultic potential of this enormous untapped resource that's now been coming into the world of hauntology and things like that. And you see, and that's basically where we're kind of going tonight a little bit, but it's in the cinema context. But this is the whole thing. The conspiratorial world has treated these elements within movies like there's something to be afraid of, or something to be
Right.
fearful of. Like for instance, how many conspiracy theories about the Eyes Wide Shut? They're endless, right? They're endless, right? But they to me, Eyes Wide Shut is not about that at all. It's opening a portal into a world that I want to know more about. I don't want
To
to
me,
be
it's
afraid
it's
of it.
more of like it's the dissolution of a marriage. Very matter of factly, but with that comes the dissolution of the self and who you once were. Like
Yeah,
that's why Eyes Wide Shut works on so many levels,
yeah,
about that. And then to have it charge with an actual couple that was literally marriage was dissolving.
In
You
real
know?
life, and they're both
Yeah.
involved in Scientology and things like that, you know.
Right.
But so it's, you know, that's what makes that, and then you have like the conspiracy theorists who will like sit there analyzing the film. Oh, it's about the Illuminati and devil worship. Well, no, this is one of the reasons I got very tired of the conspiratorial world, is because of the surface level infantilism of symbolism and symbology.
Right.
You know, no, look further, look deeper, and
They're
see the
wearing
Spanish.
robes, which means they're doing bad
I
things.
know, no, and you know, I've even seen the new one, that the mask that you have to wear for the coronavirus that's the mask that
Oh.
now they're claiming that that's a new one, but it's like, you know, they're in understanding these things. I've been like 10 years on the scene now, and I've been trying to get this to people and trying to get them to understand. Within these realizations and these understandings of the symbolism within these films and stuff like that, there is gifts for you. There is a mine of gifts for you as an artist, or as a creator, as a human being, as a plumber, as an electrician, anything.
Right.
And by acknowledging the echoes they have with your subconscious mind and how they react to them, it has a great worth in your life. And the conspiratorial thing has them all afraid of it, ultimately, because a lot of it goes back to the Christian, sort of like, you know, Bible Belt American thing in the 60s. Yeah, all that, you know, Christian
Even
identity
to the
world.
Satanic Panic, yeah, of the
Oh
80s.
yeah, the
Like,
Satanic Panic, yeah, and yeah, the Satanic Panic is a it's a fascinating story, that though, when you look into it, because there was some truth to it as well, because that it all came like, for instance, there was basically a town in England, a poor town, I think it was Rotherham, where on the entire street, all the kids were accused of parents of being involved in a satanic ritual cult.
right.
But that was the same time at their local MP, a guy called Cyril Smith, was a notorious pedophile working in the neighborhood.
Was that the
So
like Luminous Thanateros connection, or
no, I don't think.
no? Yeah, there. I'm diving down another hole, but there is a connection. If you ever look that up, it's weird. Yeah.
The Satanic Panic was very Presbyterian. It was that's what I found fascinating by it. It only happened in Protestant. It was like the witch trials and the witch persecutions of the Middle Ages, of the Reformation. It was a Presbyterian thing. It's very interesting, like how the Lutheran mindset is always looking for witches and stuff like that. Where the sort of like the other
Right.
side of Christianity, like more Orthodox Christianity, like Catholicism, they're comfortable with devils and demons being around them.
So, and like with that, do you think that to me then it seems like there's the push for occult tropes, you know, as kind of horror tropes is the Presbyterian thing, like you were discussing.
Yeah, I
You
think
know?
so. I think, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like in Catholicism, and I'm not saying one is better than the other or anything like that. I'm just saying it's just a fact that, you know, like there's the Latin Mass, and you know, when if you were a Catholic up until 1967, when Vatican II came in, you were basically hearing a mass that would echo very similar to what would have been in the pagan temples of ancient Rome, in the Temple of Jupiter. You know, this is what you would have
Right.
heard. A 3,000-year-old language from a pagan past. And this was the whole thing with the Protestant Reformation, was to say like, okay, that's really, you know, it's not really Christianity, it's paganism. And they moved Christianity more towards Judaism and things like Lutheranism and stuff like that. Now, in that, the best and the most terrifying folk tales seem to come from Presbyterian cultures, the Grimm's brothers, you know,
Sure.
you know, Germany and stuff like that, and and the best ones too, the best, and these folk tales were almost compensating these are, when you read those Brothers Grimm tales, they're much darker than what we
Oh
know them to
yeah.
be. They're shocking, actually. They're
Brutal.
ferocious, yeah. And so that was the Presbyterian correction, where all the demons and gargoyles of Catholicism were suddenly brought into that world. Now, if you look at Hollywood and you look at the whole thing of a horror film, is it, yeah, what's that? We live in a modern age. We have these miracles of science and engineering and stuff like that. I can sit in a cinema and I can eat a bar of chocolate and watch a projector put a thing there. But we're also, there's also a vulnerability to it as well. You're affixed, you're held, you're looking at that screen like it's a mass.
Right.
It's an
It's a
altar.
submission. Yeah.
Yeah, and the horror tropes are the acknowledgement of the darker manifestations of the psyche that you wouldn't have in modern life. Oh, we don't have demons. We don't believe in demons in the modern world. We don't believe in devils. We don't believe in entities. But the archetypes that they represent within the material world are still present. So we've moved them from grimoires and from the lesser key of Solomon's and from the gargoyles surrounding our churches, and made them into Freddy Krueger, made them into Jason from Friday the 13th, made them into the Blair Witch. And have you noticed that the less ethereal, the less material, and the more miasmic the horror in a movie is, the more powerful it is.
Oh, of course, yeah, like the banal kind of human. Yeah,
like
horror. That's always the worst.
There's nothing in the Blair Witch Project. There's nothing. It's a film about nothing, right? But look at it, and the power, the endurance of that, the psychic endurance of that film is incredible, and it's a film about nothing.
It really is, yeah. It's almost like all build up, no climax. I mean, there is a slight climax. The entire film, though, is just them strengthening, the folklore of it.
Yeah.
To have, very kind of menial, but that's what I was saying. The best, the greatest things are the ones, the fears that are off screen. It's like I said, that Hitchcockian thing.
Jaws, I put in that category as well. The Jaws. There's actually, the more I look at Jaws now, the more I see a very Lovecraftian kind of message. That shark is really, a monster swimming from the subconscious into the world of this island, and it's very Lovecraftian. The more it's less of a shark now and more of a demon to me at this point. But that was another film as well. It was like, the terrors of the water, what we can't see.
Well, you could even look at Jaws in the same scope as, say, Michael Myers in the original Halloween, right? This kind of blank-eyed killing machine, no rhyme or reason. They give a little backstory. There's that famous TV edit where they make him, the sister, or I'm sorry, the brother of Laurie Strode, but that's never truly like canon until the second movie. But it's this senseless boogeyman. Like, he's a shark. He's a literal shark, and that's the scariest. That's the scariest part. Yeah.
And again, the use of the music, and again, it's another thing too. Soundtracks, the use of music.
Best,
John Carpenter using the analog synthesizers in all his films, and a lot of his films, and then you have Dario Argento. Who was it? Camel did the music for that. There's like really frenetic. Suspiria as this really frenetic kind of like jazz rock soundtrack.
Very like they would call it fusion back then, but it's fusion, very frenetic. And that was the beauty of it too, especially with a movie like Suspiria, which it's pretty dance based. Like, to me in Suspiria, the ritual you're watching is the human body and like what it can do and move and sequence with other things, and then you have music on top of it. I mean, to me, a lot of audiomancy really lies in film scores. The fact that it's created for a visual purpose, but you can hijack it and use it to literally. I listen to, Ennio Morricone, or even like the Dust Brothers score for Fight Club or something, to write, or you know what I mean? Like, there's these scores that transcend. Angelo Badalamenti with all of his David Lynch stuff. Like, it doesn't need the visual or like the narrative of what it was born, but it can live outside of it and have a new life with you personally. I'm glad you brought up film scores. I wanted to go into that because, to me, that's some of the most like transcendental parts of these films that talk about. Suspiria is a good one. I mean, Halloween, John Carpenter score, it still haunts me to this day. And it's not that it conjures images of Michael Myers or this, you know, Jaws like human figure.
It's alive by itself.
Yes, exactly.
That arpeggio with that repetitive, it's like, I don't know, it's a bass guitar or a bass keyboard. Boom, and then, boom, yeah, it's fantastic. And it's so simple, but it's primal because it's a kind of that would have been very similar to the drumming that our pagan ancestors would have, you know, played around the stone circle. So he reached into a deep well of spiritual archaeology with that piece of music.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny too, in the future, when they brought Michael Myers back after the failed want of an anthology with Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which had no Michael Myers, they brought him back, and eventually they described his background, you know, as this ritual, this Celtic ritual of Thorn, and it was Samhain based, and they'd always came back down to this Celtic kind of tribalistic, you know, cultism.
Yeah, well, the thing was, is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which I reviewed as well. It's nothing like the other two films.
Oh, nothing. Yeah,
but it's still great.
I think it's great. Yeah,
it's a great, and it's got great. I love the transhumanist elements, the robots, and this crazy this toy maker who moves onto robots and stuff like that.
Nothing haunted me more than the crickets coming out of the eyeballs of the kids when I was a kid watching that.
Oh, the snakes.
The snakes, yeah. Oh. Yeah,
and there's a great
that was a very Shamrock, you know, like it was Shamrock.
6 more days to Halloween. And the scene where it shows the kids in different American cities walking at sunset to their slaughter, and you have that, then the Halloween theme comes in again, that ding ding. Oh, it's fantastic, and you just see the silhouettes of the kids against American cities dressed as trick or treat.
And like too, like the archetypes of, you know, the second idea, like you have the witch, the skeleton, the pumpkin. Those are the masks they used. Yeah, Season of the Witch isn't talked enough. I think it's getting a little bit of a resurgence of like, you know, the scar of it not being a Michael Myers movie. It's like is non-existent now. It's, you know, it's better than the Michael Myers movies that came after it.
Yeah.
You know? So. Yeah, but there's a lot of occultic stuff in there, especially, you know, like I said, with the Celtic stuff. I think it started, obviously in Halloween and Samhain, you know, but the Shamrock Company.
Well, it was written by Nigel Keneal or Neil, whoever his name is, the screenplay, and he did a lot of that kind of folk horror stuff for British TV, Quatermass movies, which are often rooted in those. Quatermass 3, which is a fantastic TV. It was on Channel 4, I think, in England in the late 70s or ITV, and it was a TV miniseries, fantastic, and that is all about an alien force from outer space was harvesting the youth of the world through this these rituals of bringing them to certain sites and harvesting them. And that was definitely brought into Season of the Witch.
Right. God, I got to look that up. You got to send me a link to that. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. It's on YouTube as well.
Oh, even better. Yeah, there's something enduring about Celtic occultism within horror movies, you know, especially since like The Wicker Man. But even that could be argued that's more of just like a blanket.
I think because it still exists.
Pseudo paganism, you know.
It still exists, kind of, you know, like it became folklore. You know, like in Ireland, paganism never really went away. It became folk tradition. But you still have reverence to sacred wells and stuff like that. So I think the fact that it survived, it's like a Santa Muerte thing as well. I think that's something that it should be really tapped into by filmmakers in this occultic field.
I was going to bring up, unfortunately, it was used, you know, in the damning way, that tax collector movie from David Ayer.
I haven't seen
with
it.
Shia LaBeouf, and it's Shia LaBeouf. The big joke is that he's wearing brown face, but you know, I grew up in the barrio. Like I know white kids that talk like that. You
Yeah.
know, like it's more of like just a cultural thing. But they use Santa Muerte in the way that the rival gang was, you know, this dark occult worshiper that did these dastardly rituals to, you know, gain power and stuff. And that's
Well,
not at
that's
all what Santa
but
Muerte is.
that sounded promising, those too. The film wasn't any good though.
Oh no, the film was fine. I didn't mind it, but I'm just talking about how they use Santa Muerte now.
In the same
You
way
know,
Ari Aster used Midsummer in Northern
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm fascinated by that stuff, and you know, there's and again back to Hollywood. You know, this whole like Latino, Latin American, Hispanic stuff. It has not been. It's another enormous well that hasn't been tapped into.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's, you know, there's a Spanish kind of uh, import with, you know, Guillermo del Toro and Devil's Backbone and all
Yeah.
of those. You know, obviously his adaptation of Mike Mignola's Hellboy, which, you know, the BPRD, the Bureau of, you know, Paranormal Research and Defense, you know, there's a lot of like undertone using as as tropes. I hate to hark on that word, but Devil's Backbone, which is basically a ghost story, it's a brilliant film.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
But
Uh,
there are Hispanic elements, you know. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of the good ones, you know, because La Llorona came out, and La Llorona was a folk tale that I grew up with that I have a strong affinity for. It was a
right.
cautionary tale told to us kids to not play in the arroyos, you know, because we'd get washed up because they would flood them routinely. So and it's this long history in Mexico and the story, and then of course this horror movie comes out called La Llorona, and it's like just trash. It's like it's the worst.
Yeah. But there was a potential.
There was
Yeah.
a potential. It's a beautiful story, too, and I wouldn't even say you'd have to create it, you know, as a kind of biographical, you know, La Llorona thing, but it haunts so many cultures here in the American Southwest for different reasons. There's so many ways you can go aside from just making it another jump scare spooky movie.
The Devil's Backbone, I think, worked because it was dealing with the kind of Spanish psyche in the wake of the Spanish Civil War, which was a vicious and a brutal civil war that, you know, was a horror, a catastrophe that that nation that they still haven't fully healed from. And I think
Right.
that was very much apparent. I think you even hear the guns encroaching in the distance. You can hear the artillery going off and things like that in some scenes. And that was, I mean, I can imagine a person in Spain watching that, being, you know, being quite disturbed by it.
Yeah, and the beginning of Pan's Labyrinth too. I mean, just Guillermo del Toro's depictions of, you know, that time and that war is harrowing. And you know, on top of it, that's really just the bone, to full pun intended, of like a lot of what, you know, his personal work was, where it was always it then you know, it trailed into a very paranormal or kind of mystical mystery,
Yeah.
um, which I love. It's almost it's a lot of the, you know, pushing against the times, and you know, this weird meandering into another world or an ethereal world whilst crazy shit is happening
Yeah.
around you. You know, it's a lot of 2020. I imagine there's going to be good films about this. Fortunately, I hope we can get through like the coronavirus films that are absolutely going to come out. You know, like the
I would like to see it resurrected in the vampire genre. I think something like that. I'd like to see a new take on that.
yeah. Yeah,
Because
that would. I mean, I feel like, and speaking of Guillermo del Toro, like he did a show of vampires. I forget what it's called. It's like the plague, not the plague. That's Camus, I think. But he did some sort of vampire show that was very much about the disease or the spreading of sickness. That it's like 28 Days Later, but it's vampires.
Yeah, I reckon this. Hopefully, that when we look back in 2020, I was reading about, and my grandmother, she's long dead now, told me about the War of Independence in Ireland, and how during the fighting in Dublin, that the lights would be switched off at night, and all you would hear were gunshots in the distance, like a rifle going off or a machine gun, and it was spooky. And he said there would be no street lights; they'd be all knocked out, the power would be knocked out, and occasionally you'd hear a burst of a gun in the distance. This would be like 1916 to 1920, and the way she described it to me, what was sound, and she was actually shot herself in the hand accidentally, but the way she described it to me was very similar to how 2020 feels. We're locked in home. We can't go out. There's a darkness and a silence. I feel that right now. There's a palpable silence. It's almost crushing at the moment. People aren't opening and communicating like we normally do. It's almost something very primal has come into us, and that's often again it's a good a good place for development of stories and myths and legends. But we're seeing a kind of a horror trope, use your term, in real time with the whole corona thing. People have come to almost venerate, like it is like a chaos god at this point. There's all kinds of rituals, hand bathing, washing, mass, sacred vestments, all this kind of thing to go with it. And there is an opportunity, we're seeing people. I mean, I saw one guy last week, I'm not kidding you, Keats. He was absolutely terrified. He was absolutely terrified. Like as if the coronavirus was an actual predator, like the shark in Jaws or Michael Myers, waiting to come to get him, and literally terrified to leave his home. I have a friend an English friend here who cleans windows, and he was telling me that the old people hand them the money after they paid for he cleaned their windows. They hand it through a letterbox in a plastic bag. Now it's made people terrified, and we've been reminded of how dark we are as a species.
It's funny too, like, and to kind of, I guess, to circle back and close it up with the whole adversity breeds passion thing. There is flourishing, I foresee, and there are spurts of it happening insular, introverted, kind of with whoever, we're entombed with or working against, this unifying bond of the outside web that kind of binds us all, that is like going through turmoil and government not knowing what to do about it, and mainstream media afraid of it, and what do we do about it? What precautions do we take? And then that's after you leave the house. But here we are in our houses, and we're reflecting back to ourselves and remembering that God slaps you in the face when you're making plans or whatever, and that everything that we thought we'd be, where we'd be, who we'd be, is kind of out the window right now. We have to build up and kind of it's that alchemy.
And without being too melodramatic, I do feel that evil is on the march. Whatever evil is, whatever an evil force is, I feel it very strong at the moment. There's if it's, you want to reduce it down to something like just the darkness of the human psyche, if you want to bring it into something like an allegorical or even a literal belief in some kind of demon army in the background or something. But I feel like that there's something simmering in the background. I can't explain what it is, and I'm not trying to be negative or anything like that, but it doesn't have humanity's best interest at heart. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think everyone's the leaders we have, the people that we listen to, the people that guide us and run things, and create avenues for us that are before us, or gatekeepers. Like they're all
Yeah.
humans too, and everyone is just floundering, under what this is. So it's a constant mirror back and forth of an unknown or the other.
Well, to bring the movie back into it, the color out of space. I mean,
Right.
that's what the coronavirus is. The color out of space. The corona is the
Great
light.
movie.
And that movie with Nicolas Cage, that kind of foreshadowed what we're going through now. The destruction of the family, the destruction of the and once again, prove again. I know I've been saying this till blue in the face that Lovecraft was a real occultist, whether he wanted to admit it or not. He was, and he was a chaos magician. Absolutely, he was. But he in the color out of space, what we're seeing in that movie and that sort of story is what we're going through right now. We're all living in the woods outside Arkham at this point. The natural order of things is completely broken down, and that film, I would say, if people want to see a film, they haven't seen that film, go watch that tonight or tomorrow, and then think about it in terms of where we are in the world right now, and you will see that it definitely brushed on the side of prophecy.
And it was great too to see Richard Stanley's big comeback since being ousted out of the island of Dr. Moreau way back in the day. And guy did Hardware and Dust Devil, like beautiful filmmaker. And this was his, he came like a crusader almost to document
his own redemption.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that film, that was a challenging film to make. Because
I can't even imagine. Yeah.
I know CGI makes things easier, but it's still difficult. It's still difficult. I spoke to the woman who was the occult advisor on that. Another amazing synchronicity. A friend of mine, her best friend, was the occult advisor on that film, and she deliberately made the girl read Simon's Necronomicon rather than an occult, a regular cult book, for that reason. And I had a very interesting discussion with her. And so that film was well researched from the occult point of view.
I love it. That's interesting. I was just thinking about today when I was thinking about Dark Song, because I got contacted a year or two ago by a Portland filmmaker to be kind of an occult supervisor. And it was almost, I was like, holy shit, was that a Dark Song? Because the way he mentioned the story was very similar to it. And I did the same thing where, I gave him, these people don't know what they're toying with, but they want to toy with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just, I understand like covering the basis of being like, minus this or add this, or, as kind of a wink, a referential wink to other folks to know that, like Ari Aster did with, the Paimon sigil, like take some stuff out, you know, just in case.
Just in case, yeah.
Well, Thomas, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Yeah, thank you. I always enjoy these talks. It was something different to talk about than the usual crap going on in the world.
I mean, I hope that, if anything, the advent of whatever's happening outside at least continues this cross-cultural, trans-dimensional wayfaring that is talking with somebody in Ireland while being in Colorado, or, I love that. I love that, say what you will about what happened to us in 2020, but I became a lot closer to the people that are nowhere near me.
And I also, it became a great education about yourself and others.
Right.
You learn your limitations and your possibilities, and also the same with other people around you. So I found that, I mean, I've met a lot of very nice new people as well that through this also, but I've also had people that disappointed me because they became hysterical and there was no need for it. So it was little things like that.
Yeah, I'm sure, too, just with the hysterics of going through this, I'm sure I've disappointed a couple of people. during this time with my own bouts of, mental health or just surviving. I think it's kind of part and parcel to whatever's happening. I think after this, I hope people look at, there's a lot less deification, there's a lot less pedestal, and there's more, just kind of unity and just a fractured relationship we have with humanity.
Yeah, and it'd be a good time. People also, if they haven't seen the films that we talk about, well, you're getting a great opportunity to sit down, actually sit them, and have a notebook with you, engage with the film with a notebook.
Yes.
Because you will, even if you've no plans to do anything with it, you find that you can enjoy the film on a different level just by taking notes down and then looking at them later and thinking on. And I thought this is a good time for you. When this is over, go out there and these films we've spoken about tonight. Go and watch them, and then formulate your own. How do they sit in your consciousness? How do they make you feel?
I hope that I get a good rendering of all of the stuff we mentioned in the show notes in the next couple of days. We went over so much, and there's so much brilliant stuff in there. I want to thank everyone in the chat: Michelle Embry, Amanda Pomander, Navier, the Robin Eagle Song, who, I know we're both big fans of the Grannies. Yeah. Thomas. She was in here. John Aside. Thank you guys all so much for popping in, saying hi, Niche. And, to close it out, Thomas, is there anything that you want to guide people to coming up in the future?
I'm going to, well, I've got a film I'm working on at the moment about the Odin and the relationships with the Christian archetype of Jesus Christ, which I'm putting has become a kind of revelation to me, quote unquote. I went around to England before the Rona thing locked us down, looking at old Anglo-Saxon crosses, and discovered, hold on a second, why they're covered in pagan symbolism. So that'll be a new thing that'll be coming out, and it'll be a bit of a new theory, not a brand new theory, but my own take on it. And also, I'm in the process of writing a documentary on Jack Parsons.
I love it.
Will be coming out next year, and hopefully when all this nonsense is down, and I get out to LA and do some filming there and stuff like that. So that's I'm currently writing both of them. The Odin one, the Odin Jesus one, should be out next few weeks. I keep saying it'll be out next week, but then I find new things to add to it. So I want to just beef it up. It'll be similar to Lever Providence, my documentary about Lovecraft's occultism, and then the Jack Parsons one in the new year. And so that's basically
which YouTube channel would those premiere?
These will be all on Beyond 313.
It's a great channel. Yeah,
that's my kind of like produced, my posh channel. Where there's not vlogs. It's the product is in there.
Well, it's absolutely apropos that you're working on Jack Parsons, and we just talked about our love for the occult.
And I want
California.
Yeah, and also space travel. There's not enough stuff about that. The cosmic, the mysticism of space travel has not been properly done justice to, I don't think. And you look at the Russians and the Soviets and the Americans had basically the same technology at the time. I believe that the Americans got to the moon because they actually had an occultic foundation through the Freemasons, both by Parsons initially, but also he set that charge in motion that meant they got to the moon first. They got to the moon, but the Russians didn't.
I can't wait to hear more about that. You're always very revealing about different avenues with this stuff. That's why I had to have you on talking, everything under the sun. We said cinema and occult. We went back to it, but I'm always going to really appreciate the meanderings that me and you both walked down. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Keats, and best of luck with this new series.
Thank you.
It's a great idea.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it keeps me constant, and consistent. But I'm going to I'm going to premiere a song. Those of you still watching, at the end, I've made it kind of a routine thing every liminal stream to premiere a new demo or snippet audiomancy that I'm working on and sequence it with something fun. Tonight I'm going to be premiering another track that I have created to help tether the audio sigil that is coming out. If anything, this is a testament to show you that I have been working on it. I'm talking about this forever. It's coming, I promise. And with that, we'll end the show. So I want to thank everyone in chat. Thank you to all the patrons, especially thank you to you, Thomas. And, haunt on.